A man who, despite being one of the wealthiest people on the planet, still lives in the same house he purchased when Dwight D. Eisenhower was in the White House.
We're talking about Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha. And what makes his story so compelling isn't just his success, it's his restraint.
The core anecdote happens in 1958.
That's right. Buffett is 28 years old, married, and he's already accumulating significant wealth. But he was deeply influenced by the cultural memory of the Great Depression, which really instilled this value for durability and prudence.
So his goal wasn't to look rich.
No, not at all. It was to be fundamentally secure.
So he purchases a 5-bedroom stucco home in Omaha, Nebraska. It's a solid, practical house.
For $31,500, and you have to adjust that for $1958. It's roughly $330,000 today. But even so, it was still not the home of a rising financial star.
Right.
The sources really emphasized the choice was deliberate. It wasn't about finding the cheapest possible place. It was about finding a safe, dependable home base that was, well, boring enough to never demand attention or costly upgrades.
Boring meant predictable.
Boring meant predictable. Predictable meant safe.
The power of this is that he refused, from the start, to let his identity be dependent on lifestyle inflation. He didn't let his success mandate an upgrade. He just maintained this foundational fixed cost that was calm and easily manageable.
That is the critical distinction. Many people are frugal when they're starting out because they have to be. Buffett's decision became an enduring strategic commitment. As his wealth just exploded and Berkshire Hathaway became this industrial behemoth, the cultural pressure to move, to upgrade, to perform wealth, it must have been overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely. For shareholders, for peers.
Yet, he refused the status game entirely. Reuters confirms he continues to live in that exact same home.
He kept his private life calm and his fixed costs low. He didn't turn his domestic life into a bonfire that required this constant, stressful feeding just to keep the illusion of ever-increasing success alive.
And that decision creates the single most powerful edge an investor can have: patience.
Patience, right.
If your personal runway is short, if your massive mortgage or complex lifestyle requires the next log to be thrown onto the fire immediately, you just cannot exercise the patient compound interest strategy that made him successful. This brings us to the principle, the difference between treating money as a tool for optionality versus treating it as a trophy for validation.
And the outcome of that is creating what the sources call margin.
The margin, exactly.
We hear that word used in finance, but you're suggesting this margin is more than just financial, right? It's a broader concept of space.
Absolutely. It's the space between what you earn and what you are structurally required to spend. When you maximize that margin, it becomes the ultimate leverage, and it immediately spills into emotional and decision margin.
Okay.
The sources detail 3 key interlocking benefits of building this kind of structural thrift, this sort of foundational conservatism. First, your future stops being fragile. We don't realize how much mental energy we burn every day worrying about what happens if we lose a paycheck or if the car breaks down or the roof leaks. When you have structural margin, emergencies stop being these existential catastrophes.
They just become inconveniences.
They become inconvenient problems you can solve. You stop living in that high anxiety state of always being one missed payment away from disaster.
Okay, so that's the first one. What's the second?
Second, your values stay in charge. If you are perpetually paying for last year's raise, you lose your agency. You have to take the draining job. You have to tolerate the toxic client, and you have to compromise your time because the system demands more fuel.
Because you're trapped.
You're trapped. Margin allows you to say no to obligations that poison you. It protects your time and your ethics because you aren't financially desperate. You can choose work based on meaning, not just necessity.
Yeah, the third.
And third, your self-respect stops being rented. If you don't need to perform wealth, if your car, your neighborhood, and your watch don't dictate your self-worth, you don't have to chase the constant validation of your peer group.
That's psychologically huge.
It's liberating. It allows your identity to be internal, stable, and independent of external benchmarks.
That structural security is immediately contrasted with the great trap of modern success: lifestyle inflation.
Right.
You earn more, you normalize the new, higher spending baseline, and suddenly that 20% raise just vanishes into a bigger car payment and a nicer vacation. Your freedom shrinks as your income grows.
That's what we call the nicer cage. It's an unsustainable, reactive pattern built on the idea that external upgrades will fix some internal unhappiness. And you nailed the emotional cost. The anxiety and debt required to maintain that nicer cage often outweigh the comfort it provides.
You're just trading future optionality for present vanity.
That's a great way to put it.
And this brings us directly to the wisdom of Benjamin Franklin, who was an early advocate for this kind of financial self-command. He wrote in Poor Richard's Almanac way back in 1745, "Beware of little expenses, a small leak will sink a great ship."
We often treat that quote as simple accounting advice, watch your pennies. But the sources encourage us to interpret this as a profound statement on character. A life built on small, constant indulgences, the little things we feel entitled to because we deserve them, is a life that eventually can't bear real discomfort. If you can't say no to the daily coffee, how will you say no to the impulsive investment?
It's training.
It's training. Growth, financial, intellectual, or personal, requires deferred gratification. It requires training, saving, repairing, and waiting.
So when you choose restraint as a lifestyle, you aren't just saving dollars. You're saving future you, a person capable of discipline when the stakes are highest. But this sounds hard in today's economy where, housing costs are astronomical. How does someone start applying Buffett's 1958 mindset to the realities of today?
That's a fair challenge. The goal isn't necessarily to buy a house for $31,000 today, but to apply the ratio of fixed costs to optionality.
The principle.
Exactly, the principle. The tools provided focus on structural solutions, not just willpower. The first tool is the hardest, but it's the most vital. Define a forever baseline.
What do you mean by that?
You need to decide what enough housing, what enough car, and what enough core monthly spending looks like for you. And then you treat upgrades in these categories as rare strategic events, not automatic reactions to a bonus or a raise.
So you stop moving the goalposts.
You stop moving the goalposts that dictate your required income.
That's pre-deciding stability, and that feels really powerful. But what about when the money actually hits the bank account? That's when temptation is highest.
Right, and that brings us to the second tool, automate the gap. The moment income arrives, you route a fixed percentage, say 20%, to savings, investing, or debt reduction before you can consciously spend it or even acknowledge it's there.
Get it out of sight.
You have to. You need to remove the psychological friction from the right choice and apply it to the wrong one. You pay future you first.
Okay, what's next?
The next step addresses those little leaks Franklin warned about. We recommend practicing the 24-hour rule for non-essentials. If it isn't food, shelter, or an immediate necessity, you wait a full day before purchasing.
Just a little speed bump.
An intentional speed bump. It allows that emotional spike of want to dissipate, and most impulsive needs simply evaporate overnight.
I also like this final psychological practice, which directly combats that status game we discussed.
Practice visible simplicity.
Right. Keep at least one major status category, your phone, your wardrobe, your car, intentionally plain or dated. It trains your ego to stop demanding external applause. It says, my value and security are internal, not rented or performed.
And that's harder than it sounds. It requires bucking social norms.
It really does. But it's a form of strength training. You're training your internal sense of self-worth. For our listener, the micro steps are designed to trigger immediate action. Start with a subscription audit. List 3 recurring charges you could cancel in 5 minutes and cancel just 1 today. Then you need clarity. Choose a specific number for a weekly fund budget. Not a vague feeling, but a hard, trackable number.
That's crucial.
And finally, set an automatic small transfer scheduled the day after payday. Make the decision when you have clarity, not when you have cash in hand.
That makes the principle tangible immediately.
The maxim for this financial section is clear. Spend like you're still becoming. Don't spend like you've arrived, because if you spend like you've arrived, you limit where you can still go. We just established that financial constraint, or thrift, buys you freedom and optionality. The moment you master conserving money, you realize you have to do the same for your most finite, non-renewable asset.
Time and attention.
Exactly. That structural stability allows you to protect mental energy, which leads us to our next principle, scheduled rest.
And the sources provide a phenomenal, almost unbelievable historical example of a limit that appeared to cost a man everything he had trained for, but ultimately led to an unexpected record-breaking victory.
Let's talk about Eric Liddell, the Flying Scotsman at the 1924 Paris Olympics. He was a generational talent, the clear favorite for the 100 meters, which at the time was the most prestigious track event.
No question.
However, when the schedule was finalized, the qualifying heats for the 100 meters were scheduled on a Sunday.
And Liddell was a devout Christian. For him, Sunday was the Sabbath, a day set apart for worship and rest. The sources note he refused to run the qualifying heats and instead spent the Sabbath preaching at the Scots Church in Paris.
Just think about the internal and external pressure. It's the Olympics. This was a defining moment of his career.
And as Olympedia notes, this wasn't a last-minute realization or some kind of tantrum. He knew the schedule well in advance and trained accordingly. He made the deliberate, conservative choice to prioritize his structural boundary, his tradition of rest over the opportunity for maximum professional glory.
He treated his values not as decorations to be admired when it's convenient,
Right.
but as load-bearing beams that must carry weight. A beam that fails under pressure is useless.
And the modern default is maximum productivity and constant availability. Work bleeds into home life, the phone bleeds into sleep, and we believe we are too important to stop. Liddell's refusal was a radical act of self-command. He understood that success built on self-betrayal is inherently fragile.
But the paradox is profound. Because he lost the 100 meters, he shifted his focus to the grueling 400 meters, a longer, less familiar sprint that few expected him to master.
And he won. He won gold in the 400 meters on July 11, 1924, setting a world record at 47.6 seconds.
Wow.
The ultimate win came not despite his boundary, but arguably because of the structural stability and internal clarity that boundary provided. He was rested, morally secure, and completely focused.
So what is the philosophical principle of rest here? What does that limit signal about how we view our own capacity and productivity?
It signals that you are not a machine, and your worth is not measured purely by continuous output. If you never stop, you never metabolize your life, you never process the inputs, you don't reflect, and you don't repair the small damages accumulated throughout the week. The sources lay out 4 interlocking kinds of strength that flow from a committed weekly structural rest period. First, physical and mental recovery. Rest is maintenance, not idleness. It allows the nervous system to settle, reducing the baseline stress hormone levels that lead to chronic fatigue and burnout.
Okay, that makes sense. What's number 2?
Second is relational strength. The most important relationships and traditions, family time, meaningful friendships, scheduled connection, they don't happen when you are simply free or when you get around to it. They happen because they are scheduled and protected.
Have to make time for them.
The Sabbath forces you to stop and invest in those non-quantifiable but essential parts of life. Third is moral clarity. Boundaries are the mechanism by which values become real. By deciding in advance what you will sacrifice for, you define your priorities in a moment of strength, ensuring you uphold them in moments of weakness.
Like Liddell did.
Exactly. And finally, strategic perspective. Rest forces distance from the immediate grind. This distance provides perspective, preventing those stupid, reactive, ego-driven decisions we make when we are constantly running on fumes and short-term thinking.
It calls to mind Abraham Joshua Heschel's beautiful description of the Sabbath as a palace in time which we build. It's a structure you enter weekly, not by physically traveling, but by stopping all activity that places you under the tyranny of time and production.
A conservative lifestyle builds that palace with rituals, limits, and consistent repetition. It's stabilizing and grounding. Practically, the tools for implementing this kind of structural rest start with choosing your protected weekly window, say Friday sunset to Saturday sunset or Saturday evening to Sunday evening, and protecting it like the most essential appointment in your calendar.
And crucially, you have to make it phone-light. You have to remove the constant notification noise that keeps the world's demands bleeding into your rest. Put the phone in a drawer for set hours.
And attach simple restorative rituals that ground you. A deliberate walk, a family meal, reading, journaling, music. The sources also suggest you focus intently on repair work, not grind work.
What's the difference?
Repair work is anything that restores life. Laundry, meal prep for the upcoming week, deep conversations, simple household organization. Grind work extracts energy. Paid labor, detailed financial planning, or obligation-based errands.
And to make the transition back smooth, and the rest period, with a structured 15-minute reset plan for the week ahead, so Monday morning doesn't steal your peace before it even begins.
For the micro steps, the learner should block 1 6-hour mini Sabbath this week, dedicate that time to one analog activity, and define a single sentence they'll stick to. On my Sabbath, I do not.
That one boundary, no shopping, no email, no social media, creates a measurable success.
Exactly.
That intentional boundary sets up the next element of structural order, which is utilizing the time we claim back. This moves us from structured rest to structured output.
Yes, from the Olympian to the Victorian novelist.
Anthony Trollope and his No Mercy morning routine.
A powerful example of incredible, almost intimidating output achieved through sheer unromantic structure. It really proves that genius often bows to discipline.
Trollope was a Victorian novelist who managed to write this enormous body of work, including the famous Barchester series, while holding a full-time, demanding job as a surveyor for the General Post Office.
And his secret wasn't inspiration, it was absolute mechanical rigidity.
He detailed this commitment in his autobiography. He began every morning at 5:30 a.m., paid an old groom extra for coffee and a wake-up call, and required himself to produce 250 words every quarter of an hour.
Every 15 minutes, he kept a watch next to him. If he finished the 250 words early, he didn't stop. He had to begin the next 250-word segment until his 3-hour quota was hit.
The sources emphasize that he allowed himself no mercy. This wasn't waiting for a muse or inspiration. This was treating the process mechanically, like a contract he had signed with himself.
And he had a demanding public career, an active social life. But he carved out this rigid private discipline that never negotiated.
So why is rising early such a profound conservative strategic advantage?
Because it combats drift, which is the enemy of ambition. Drift is late nights, screen time consumption, and reactive mornings spent answering emails or scrolling. Drift feels like freedom, but it actually makes you dependent on moods, external stimuli, and adrenaline.
While rising early is a choice.
It is a structural advantage simply because most people won't do it consistently. The early riser inherits the quiet, they inherit the focus, and they inherit the long-term, non-negotiable output. The world doesn't start making demands on you until 9 a.m. Trollope essentially captured those quiet hours for himself.
And the payoff, according to Trollope himself, was the ability to live a fuller life, which he directly attributed to the virtue of early hours.
Right. Discipline expands life because it creates competency and massive margin, allowing him to be successful in 2 demanding careers simultaneously.
So the practical tools for early rising must focus entirely on removing excuses and making the start automatic.
You must set a hard bedtime, not just a wake time. Wake times fail when nights are lawless, and you rely on an alarm clock to punish your lack of restraint from the night before.
And make those mornings single purpose. Define one priority: writing, reading, prayer, exercise, and ensure it is completed before you look at your phone.
Then use Trollope-style timed sprints. 15 minutes focus on the task, 2 minutes off to maintain ruthless focus and prevent vague intention.
And the crucial logistics. Prepare the night before. Close out, coffee maker set, desk clear, friction removed. Track the streak on a calendar to give yourself visible, compounding momentum.
The dual maxim that closes this section should be absorbed deeply by the listener. Rest is not a reward, it's a rule. It must come first. And win the morning and you inherit the day.
We've established boundaries for money and time. Now we move to the interior life. Managing character and reputation, the power of pre-commitment. This is about building structural integrity for the soul. And we start with a conversation that took place in Modesto, California in 1948.
This conversation became the foundation of what is known as the Modesto Manifesto, established by the evangelist Billy Graham and his core team. Graham was young, successful, and rising quickly in public life.
And he and his team recognized a dangerous pattern.
Right. They saw that public success doesn't just amplify impact, it massively amplifies predictable moral risks.
So they saw that ministry, like any public-facing career, politics, media, executive leadership, had these predictable pressure points that could lead to destruction.
Exactly. So the sources say they sat down and decided what could destroy them if they were careless. They identified 4 major vectors of predictable failure: money and finances, sexual immorality, honesty in public reporting, and isolation or a lack of accountability.
This is the genius of the conservative approach. They weren't waiting for a crisis to define their ethics.
No, they were getting ahead of it.
They were choosing guardrails while they still had the clarity and humility to install them.
Right. The manifesto led to concrete resolutions: financial integrity via transparent accounting, moral boundaries like never meeting a woman alone, and truthful reporting, no exaggeration in crowd numbers or anecdotes, and deep accountability to local churches.
Christian history noted that the goal was not just avoiding wrongdoing, but avoiding the appearance of wrongdoing that can permanently erode public trust.
That moment, choosing pre-commitment when they were calm, is the definition of structural integrity. They made the tough, conservative calls when they were clear-headed, so they wouldn't have to improvise with their reputation when they were tired, flattered, or isolated.
The core principle here is non-negotiable. Guardrails are pre-committed limits you set before fatigue or ego shows up to negotiate.
And the conservative wisdom says, don't trust your best intentions in your worst moments. The modern default is reactive morality. I'll deal with that ethical gray area if it becomes a problem. That is just gambling with your most valuable asset, integrity.
I can imagine a listener pushing back and asking, isn't a manifesto or a set of rigid rules too restrictive? Doesn't it limit flexibility?
That's a crucial question. The counterintuitive answer is that the limits define your freedom. When the boundaries are clear, your mind stops wasting enormous amounts of energy on constant micro-bargaining about where the line is.
Oh, that's interesting.
Should I take this meeting? Should I spend this money? Is this story accurate enough? Clear guardrails create profound peace and mental margin by stopping that constant negotiation. You conserve the cognitive energy you need for high-level tasks because the basics are automated by the rule.
So how do we build those personal guardrails?
The sources suggest formalizing the structure. First, write a personal manifesto, a declaration of your non-negotiables, under the 4 headings Graham's team used: money, sex romance, speech truth, and time rest. Define what you do and don't do under each heading, making the rules specific.
I think the most important tool here is the no private ambiguity rule.
Tell me more.
If a situation, a meeting, a conversation, an expense will look questionable to your trusted partner, spouse, or mentor if they saw it without context, just don't do it. That guardrail protects trust, which is the ultimate foundation of a stable life.
I love that. And we must make money boring. Automate transfers, simplify accounts, and keep all receipts and spending transparent and legible enough that you would feel calm if someone audited your ethics tomorrow.
And also, practice radical accuracy in your speech. No spin, no exaggeration in stories or achievements. If a story requires embellishment to be interesting, stick to the facts or skip the story entirely.
And finally, build accountability into your week. This requires vulnerability. Find one trusted person, a spouse, a mentor, a therapist, who has the permission to ask the hard, specific questions weekly.
Like, how's your spending, your screen time, your professional boundaries?
Exactly. For the micro steps, the learner should write down one specific, foreseeable future crisis they can prevent. Write the corresponding guardrail sentence: to prevent this, I will never, and share that guardrail with one trusted person within 24 hours. Verbalizing the commitment makes it real and external.
That sets up our transition from external guardrails protecting character to internal self-command, which brings us to the story of Sir Anthony Hopkins and sobriety.
Guardrails protect from the outside. Sobriety protects internal command. The story in Arizona in December 1975 is the textbook hinge moment of crisis-induced clarity where a successful man realizes he is losing the reins of his own life.
Hopkins woke up in a hotel room with no memory of how he got there. He was traveling, successful, but deeply mired in alcoholism. He described that moment, later reported by The Independent, as the terrifying realization that he could have killed someone or himself the night before and he wouldn't even know it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Alcohol, or any addictive impulse, is an equal opportunity thief. It steals judgment, consistency, and self-command, regardless of your talent, success, or social standing. The conservative instinct, the one that modern culture often dismisses as puritanical, is to treat certain pleasures with deep suspicion because they come with hooks.
What do you mean by hooks?
They convince you that you're relaxing or socializing when you're actually dulling self-awareness or escaping responsibility.
Hopkins realized the risk to his future self was too great and quit entirely. We have reports from 2025 noting he is nearing 50 years of sobriety, tracing the turning point back to that 1975 moment of absolute clarity.
And the principle is profound. Sobriety restores self-command. Success requires repeated good, consistent decisions, especially under stress, and anything that chronically impairs your judgment weakens precisely that ability. It's an act of high-stakes stewardship to protect your own mind and clarity.
And we have to acknowledge the current global context here. This isn't just about professional ethics. The World Health Organization is blunt. They state there is no safe amount of alcohol consumption that does not affect health. They classify it as a Group 1 carcinogen.
So choosing strict limits or total sobriety is not moralizing. It is high-level stewardship of your body and mind, which are your primary tools for achievement. You are protecting your ability to show up, keep your promises, and execute your strategy without the hidden chaos of dependence.
Let's focus on the practical tools for choosing sobriety or strict limits.
Start by naming your why in one sentence. Health, marriage, mental clarity, financial stability. Keep that reason visible. Then, if needed, start with a fixed season, a commitment to 30 alcohol-free days. Forever is overwhelming. 30 days is a structured commitment you can walk through successfully.
And crucial advice often missed. Delete the ritual. Replace the ritual. If you always have a drink at 6 p.m. to transition from work, you need a replacement ritual.
Like sparkling water, high-quality tea, a scheduled walk.
Right. You need something that still functions as a psychological boundary between work and rest.
And you must get support that fits reality. Tell two people, one who unconditionally loves you and one who will hold you honestly accountable. Secrets keep the addiction warm and private. If you need clinical help or recovery communities, pride is simply too expensive a luxury to get in the way of recovery.
Micro steps include removing the alcohol you reach for most often to make your home environment match your decision, tracking the physiological benefits, better sleep, improved mood, sharper focus on day 7, and planning a replacement action for one hard moment, stress, boredom, or anger, this week.
The maxims that summarize this section: freedom isn't doing anything, it's refusing what could ruin you. And the strongest life is the one you can remember, not the one you escape.
We've built individual stability with money, time, and character. Now we address the social stability that supports all ambition, relationships. We move from individual guardrails to relational infrastructure, starting with John and Abigail Adams during the height of the American Revolution.
Their marriage is one of the most famous in American history, often idealized, but the sources show it was built on a deep intellectual partnership, shared duty, and sheer necessity during a time of constant, agonizing separation and extreme strain.
So in 1776, John was in Philadelphia designing the new nation, while Abigail was managing the household in Braintree, Massachusetts, dealing with smallpox epidemics, wartime shortages, and the practical challenges of raising a family alone.
And her letter from March 1776 is a phenomenal document because she seamlessly mixes the practical and the political. She's giving John domestic updates, the house is very dirty, fears of smallpox, while also demanding high principle.
Right. She urges John, when designing the new code of laws, to remember the ladies, and she issues a stern warning against granting husbands unlimited power.
This reveals the core conservative principle of their covenant. Abigail was writing not as a passive spectator or a dependent wife. She was writing as a partner in shared duty, reminding John that strength, both in government and in marriage, requires discipline and restraint, not tyranny of impulse.
So love wasn't just an emotion for them.
It was protection, responsibility, and mutual respect built into the structure of their life.
And the result? They exchanged over 1,100 letters across decades and were married 54 years, surviving not just war and political upheaval, but personal tragedy.
That kind of endurance is never accidental. It's constructed by intentional conservative commitment. A traditional, structurally sound lifestyle treats marriage as a covenant, not a consumer product.
What's the difference there?
The consumer mindset expects to leave when the product doesn't deliver maximum ease or happiness. The covenant model says, we organize life around the durability of this relationship because it is the infrastructure required for our individual growth.
But why should a high-achieving, modern listener organize their life around this covenant? What are the practical compounding returns?
They are exponential. A durable covenant provides emotional security, psychological safety, stable children, coordinated finances, and a shared strategic vision. The resilience that allows John Adams to withstand political failure or public scrutiny comes from knowing that his home base is stable.
So a strong marriage doesn't just support success.
It shapes the kind of person who can withstand success without being destroyed by the external pressures that come with it. It's a perpetual accountability partner and anchor.
So practically, the tools for keeping your vows focus on structure, not just feeling.
Right. The sources recommend running a weekly household council, same time, same place, no interruptions, calendar coordination, financial check-in, children-family updates, and one decision you'll make together.
And you must make conflict procedural. When tensions flare, no yelling, no threats, no immediate escalation.
You take a mandatory 20-minute break when you feel emotionally flooded, then return to finish the conversation with mutual respect.
You also need to share a budget and a clear financial scoreboard to prevent secret resentment and practice public loyalty. Critique the problem in private, honor the partner in public.
And build non-negotiable rituals that withstand the pressure of busy seasons. A weekly phones down hour, a standing meal together, or a fixed evening walk that happens regardless of external demands. These are the small traditions that keep the structure alive.
For micro steps, say, I'm on your team even when we disagree today. Schedule that 30-minute household council this week and complete one small repair, an apology, a chore, a long-delayed decision within 24 hours to clear the emotional debt.
Okay, so from the core unit of marriage, we expand to the wider network.
To community. The marriage vow protects the core. Rootedness protects the social network, which takes us to a famous, almost fictional study, the Rosato Mystery in Pennsylvania in 1962.
This is one of the most compelling community studies in medical history because it identified a profound medical mystery rooted entirely in social structure.
So Rosato was a small, tight-knit Italian-American town that, for a stretch of years, about 1955 to 1965, exhibited a strikingly low mortality rate from heart attacks compared to surrounding communities.
And even more surprisingly, they showed low levels of premature death across the board.
The researchers expected to find a hidden factor, like diet or exercise.
Of course.
But typical risk factors were present. Many smoked, many were overweight, and their diet was rich in processed meats. So what was the protective factor?
It was their structural way of life. Intense, cohesive community relationships, multi-generational living, a dense web of social support, religious commitment, and, crucially, an absence of ostentation even among the wealthy.
The social infrastructure was so thick that it buffered individual stress.
Yes. They weren't performing status, they were simply living integrated lives. The community itself was the health intervention.
That is remarkable. The lack of visible status competition meant people weren't constantly stressed by social comparison, and the thick network meant no one fell through the cracks due to isolation.
Exactly. Researchers found that their social relationships were literally keeping their hearts healthy, stabilizing physiological responses like cortisol production. But there's a sobering hinge moment.
Okay.
Researchers noticed that as younger adults started abandoning those old community ways for more individualistic, typically American patterns, high mobility, the pursuit of autonomy, the desire for showy consumption, they predicted a corresponding health decline.
And the prediction tragically held true.
It did. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, the predicted social change was reported, and with it, a corresponding increase in the incidence of heart attacks and mortality rates. When the structure of tradition thinned, the physical protection thinned too.
This moves far beyond sentimentality. It's medically relevant.
Absolutely. The sources reference a PLOS medicine meta-analysis showing that the quality and quantity of social relationships are linked to mortality risk, with effects comparable to well-known factors like smoking or obesity. Isolation isn't just lonely, it's a tax on survival.
So stay rooted means treating community as non-optional infrastructure, not a weekend hobby.
You can take bigger risks in your career and endure harder personal seasons when you have a stable home base and a thick social web to fall back on.
So the practical tools for rootedness start with picking a home circle, a club, a local volunteering group, a church, and showing up weekly.
Consistency is the key ingredient. Practice local loyalty. Learn names in your neighborhood. Buy local sometimes, and be a recognizable, predictable fixture in your area.
Anchor family rhythms. Establish one standing meal or visit each week with family or chosen family. Make hospitality simple and normal low-performance invitations for a quick coffee or a potluck.
And reduce needless churn. Stability compounds. If you don't need to move every time you get a raise, don't.
The dual maxims that close this crucial section. A vow is a foundation, not a feeling. It must be built and maintained.
And a rooted life grows taller.
We've covered structural stability in finance, time, character, and relationships. Now, we end where every great journey starts, with a small, manageable act of order that connects all these large principles into daily reality. We return to the military. Admiral William H. McRaven in SEAL training.
This anecdote from 1977 Coronado is classic because of its deceptive simplicity. McRaven arrived for basic SEAL training, ready for physical exhaustion, fear, and intellectual challenge. But the very first inspection, the very first test of their self-command, wasn't a grueling run.
It was the bed.
It was the bed. It had to be perfect. Squared corners, tight covers, neat blanket.
He remembers thinking that making a bed to perfection felt insulting in its sheer ordinariness, considering they were training to be elite warriors.
But the lesson was clear, and it's the ultimate conservative principle. Mastery of the small tasks precedes mastery of fear and chaos. Conservative personal living is a commitment to order over impulse. Traditional living installs routines that carry you when motivation fails and when external chaos threatens to overwhelm you.
The bed is just the symbol. The principle is the identity shift it triggers. Making your bed is a daily declaration, the first micro-win of the day.
Right. I'm the kind of person who completes what I start. It instantly creates momentum, making the next task exercise, writing, planning easier to face.
It's the ultimate act of stewardship over your immediate environment. You treat your life down to the mundane details, like something worth maintaining.
You don't live as if future you is a stranger you can afford to disappoint or leave a mess for.
The practical tools for order are designed to shrink the commitment to make it non-negotiable. Shrink the standard. Make the morning task so easy that even on your worst, sickest day, you can complete it successfully.
And pair it with a rule. No phone until the bed is made, for instance. Use that rule as an anchor.
And remember that order isn't just a morning habit. Do a 2-minute reset at night before bed. Clear the surfaces, wash the last dish, and ensure tomorrow morning's task friction is eliminated.
Aim for consistency completing the task every single day, not intensity.
The micro steps are straightforward. Make your bed immediately tomorrow morning before checking messages. Set a 2-minute timer and reset one small area, your desk, the kitchen sink, and write. I don't negotiate with basics. Put it where you'll see it.
The final maxim for this foundational principle: order is a vote for the person you're becoming.
What a profound deep dive into the unexpected power of tradition and self-restraint. We started with the premise that real, durable success isn't built on novelty or hacks, but on dependable structural habits.
We've seen Warren Buffett using thrift to buy optionality and emotional freedom. We saw Eric Liddell and Anthony Trollope using scheduled rest and rising early to structure their time and achieve massive output.
And then Billy Graham and Anthony Hopkins using rigorous guardrails and sobriety to protect character and self-command.
And finally, the Adams Covenant and the Rosato community demonstrating that commitment and rootedness provide the enduring resilience needed for big achievements. These traditional conservative habits aren't about self-denial. They are the strategic construction of freedom and durability.
For you, the learner, these practices are the true shortcut to avoiding feeling overwhelmed. They reduce chaos, they automate the basics, and they free up your most valuable resource, mental energy, for the truly important decisions, the creative work, and the strategic thinking.
And that's the key. Stability isn't stagnation. Stability is the rocket fuel for long-term growth and high ambition.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought, which builds on that very idea that stability is crucial for ambition.
Right. I urge you to look inward. Identify one area, time, money, or relationships where you currently rely purely on impulse rather than a pre-established structure. Your next great achievement will not merely require more inspiration or motivation. It will require you to deliberately build infrastructure in that impulsive area.
Find that one impulsive area and commit to one single micro step from this deep dive today. Start building the palace.